Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Recognizing suspicion on the part of his wife, the husband decided to hire a private investigator in order to find out and gather evidence. Today's story has a similar plot. Enjoy watching it. Hello, my name is Cameron Donovan. I am 34 years old and live in Albany, New York. I'm married and have 3 children. I woke up this morning thinking it was going to be a different day than yesterday. I decided to do something about a very difficult problem that had been bothering me for some time. I had an appointment with a lawyer today to explore my options. I knew there weren't many options, but I needed help to overcome this problem. There must be a way to deal with it. It's been bothering me for almost a year. You might be wondering what I'm talking about. It's my wife, Brittany. I call her Britt. She seems to have regular appointments with someone else, and I only found out about this through a friend. It was shocking to learn that Britt was involved with another person. She was straightforward with her words when she came to my office, and after our brief discussion, she left, saying she was done with her other relationship and wishing me luck. I was stunned and had no idea what to do. My mind was racing, and I needed to figure out how to process this information. I went home that night without a clear plan. My intuition told me not to confront her immediately, but to understand my options. I needed to determine if the information I received was reliable or not. I solve complex problems at my job as a business consultant. I'm a CMA and CPA and spend most of my days tackling intricate financial and management issues for multi-million-dollar clients. I enjoy the challenge, though some find it tedious. People might assume that because I'm not the most physically fit or conventionally attractive, my wife might be dissatisfied and seeking something more. That's not entirely true. I'm an inch under 6 feet tall, have thick dark brown hair, and weigh 185 pounds with a few extra pounds around my waist. So, now I face the biggest problem of all, and Britt was discussing weekend plans at the dinner table. I couldn't focus on her words as my mind was elsewhere. I planned to talk to the children about their schedules and let them guide me. My youngest, Davy, is easy to handle and sticks close to me. Britt has always managed the family's schedule effectively, and without her, things would be chaotic. I met Britt at university while completing my bachelor's degree in business and accounting. She was a year older and studying design, specifically interior design. We dated, got married, and had 3 children, Laura, 10, Diana, 8, and Davy, 5. They all have busier social lives than I ever had. It's perplexing how every moment of children's lives is scheduled these days. A week later, after being confronted by the young lady, I sat in my office with a yellow legal pad, taking detailed notes about my situation. My plan was to get a better understanding of the problem by gathering and sorting information, using the right resources and tools. I decided against bugging my house or tailing my wife and opted to hire professionals to help. I didn't want to bug my own house or sit in my car trying to catch my wife, so I hired the best people to do it for me. I had no idea how to do surveillance, so I made a few calls and hired the right person to give me the information I needed. The agency is one that we use from time to time for other things, but they do similar work too. Katherine Johnson was a very skilled investigator. She had worked as a police investigator for several years before deciding to go private and work for herself. She came to my office, and we spent an hour discussing what I wanted from her. I gave her a recent photo of Britt and told her where she worked. Britt is an interior designer, so she's in and out of the office quite often. I guess this gives her a convenient excuse to meet her boyfriend whenever she wants. I told Katherine that I never saw any outward signs that Britt was cheating. She is always where she needs to be for our family at the right time. She never smells different, looks different, or acts different. We have busy lives, but we usually talk once or twice a week. I work hard to keep my wife at the forefront of my attention, both in our intimate life and everywhere else. My family is very important to me. Without my family, I would be a complete failure. Right now, I'm starting to doubt my abilities as a husband, so I handed over a check for $2,500 and asked Katherine to find out what my wife was doing. It took 2 weeks. During this time, I stayed the course and didn't say or do anything that would suggest to Britt that I suspected something was wrong. It was an excruciatingly painful 2 weeks. Katherine returned with her report. The news was not good. She collected evidence that Britt was meeting once a week with a guy from a wholesale furniture company her company does business with. She learned his name and some basic information about him, Dean Billings. He is single and seems to not yet have a girlfriend who could replace the one who left him. They meet at his apartment and usually spend 2 to 3 hours together. When she leaves him, she always returns to her office and works there until it's time to go home. She doesn't see him on days when it's her turn to pick up the kids from school. Was Britt in love with this guy? Was she planning on leaving her family for him? What was her plan? Catherine was able to find out what Britt was doing, but not why. This was a more difficult question. Would I ever get an answer to this question? It started to irritate me. Step 2. Get legal advice. I know a lot of lawyers, so I called one who works for our firm to get a recommendation for a family lawyer. They gave me the name of Leanne Smith, an aggressive divorce lawyer known for leaving no enemy alive. She almost always wins her cases and has a reputation for being tough on cheating spouses. Apparently, her own husband was caught cheating and is now living in less than ideal conditions. I scheduled an initial consultation to tell her my story and discuss my options. I took the investigator's report with me. The basics of divorce law in New York were quickly explained to me. State courts are very concerned about the welfare of children and generally award custody to mothers unless there is a compelling reason to decide otherwise. A good reason could be that the mother is unfit due to illness or disability, is incarcerated, or is simply a bad mother, and this is well documented. Thus, based on this, in most cases, the father must pay a significant portion of his income to support the family. This means that the father will be giving away a considerable amount of money over many years. Since my kids are young, I could expect to be paying for a very long time. It turns out that adultery doesn't have much impact in family law, at least not in the courts. A marriage license is essentially a contract that binds two people together until the court decides otherwise. Marriage is now seen as an agreement for two people to combine their resources to improve their lives and those of any children. Emotions, love, and personal feelings are not considered by the court. Who has a relationship with whom is not important to the court. So, the fact that my wife is involved with someone else every week doesn't affect the court's decision. It's a sad reality. Where does that leave me? Well, Britt will receive both child support and spousal support, known as alimony. I will get very limited time with the kids, most likely every other weekend and possibly a few weeks during the summer. This is not the same as paternity. It feels like a form of separation that will be difficult for me. I love my children, was involved in planning their arrival, and intend to be fully committed to their well-being. However, it looks like I'll only have limited time with them, which is far from what I had hoped for. If Britt and I separated and divorced now, the best outcome might be joint custody, meaning the kids would spend time in both homes. This arrangement is not ideal for children. Additionally, I would be responsible for most of the mortgage on the house and for finding my own housing. If we had joint custody, the place I live in would need to be large enough to accommodate the four of us, which would impact my plans for retirement. Moreover, Britt would be receiving financial support from me, which could potentially enable her to continue seeing other men. My primary concern was the impact on the children and how their mother's actions might affect them. I did some preliminary research online about the effects of infidelity on children and found it to be a significant issue. I wanted to do everything possible to shield them from the fallout of Britt's actions. Leanne was quite straightforward in her assessment of family law in New York State. It seemed to favor women in marriages with children. Without children, the process is more equitable, essentially just dividing the property in half and moving on. After my visit to the lawyer, I returned to my office, closed the door, and began to think about what to do next. I spent 2 hours looking at my notes, feeling as though my world was falling apart. A wave of hopelessness washed over me. I took several deep breaths to calm myself and before leaving. I wrote and circled at the bottom of my notepad, "Protect children at all costs." This was my guiding principle. I knew I had to confront Britt if her actions began to impact the children. It had already affected me deeply, but now my focus had to be on them. This meant I had to pretend that I was unaware of what she was doing. In the short term, I managed to keep up this pretense to some extent, but the problem began to gnaw at me. I became depressed when I thought about Britt with someone else, and my self-esteem plummeted. I felt like a failure, which started to manifest in small ways. I experienced moments of loneliness, betrayal, and confusion. Each morning and evening, I reminded myself that I was doing this for my children. I noticed that I started drinking more. I had gone from having about 2 beers a week to 6 or 8. My mental health was deteriorating, and I felt anxious all the time. During a checkup, my doctor suggested that I exercise more, which he was right about. I was becoming less active. To address this, I resumed running early in the morning. I began with 2 miles and, after 3 months, increased it to 5. This change greatly improved my mood, reduced my anxiety, and slowly boosted my self-confidence. I even joined a running club, which met once a week and on Sunday mornings. The club's activities, including leading runs and sharing strategies, provided a welcome distraction and helped me focus on improving my performance. Britt had to take on more parenting responsibilities during these times, especially if there were planned events. This was a consequence she had to accept, though she didn't fully understand the reason behind it. I continued to find time to confront Britt about her affair. I anticipated that a day would come when I would have to address it directly. For now, though, this had to remain my secret. Maintaining the facade of normalcy was draining, and I wasn't sure how long I could keep it up without concrete proof that things had changed. If Britt ended her relationship, there might be a chance to return to normal. If her involvement increased, I would have no choice but to act. As for my interactions with Dean, I made it clear to him that I was not interested in spending the night together. I reminded him that our relationship was intended to be just for fun and nothing more. Despite this, Dean started to insist more, becoming somewhat more demanding. He wanted to go to dinner together, but I refused. I wasn't going to jeopardize my family by publicly being seen with another man. Dean claimed I was the only woman he was seeing, but he wanted more time with me because he felt that Cam was getting more of my time. He wanted to extend our time together after our meetings and sought more intimacy. I never drank alcohol with him and always made sure to shower. So far, I had successfully kept my situation with Cam discreet and intended to continue doing so. The past year had been incredibly challenging. Accepting that your spouse doesn't see you as good enough can be devastating. I worked hard to prevent Britt's affair from destroying me. I had to admit that I wasn't the prince she desired, but I wasn't ready to give up without a fight. Britt continued to fulfill her role as a wife and mother while managing a demanding job. We still had an intimate life, though it was significantly reduced due to various obstacles. Improving this aspect of our relationship became my top priority. I needed to determine whether she still wanted me or if our intimacy had become merely a duty for her. When I looked at her, I saw the woman I had once loved and married, but I also saw a stranger, someone who seemed different from the Britt I had known. I turned to a family counselor to explore strategies for minimizing the impact of Britt's affair on the children. So far, it hasn't really affected them. They didn't know anything had changed. They just saw her as the same mom she always was. And don't get me wrong, she was a good mother. She was not cruel or devilish. She was never angry or annoyed with the children or even with me. I give Britt credit. She tried really hard to keep things looking the same as always. She never missed the children's activities or events, was always a fully supportive mother involved in school activities, and did her share of work. I also asked a marriage counselor to help me explore ways to increase the level of closeness between Britt and me. This goal was a bit more difficult, and the consultant gave me several books. What has changed over the past year are the less obvious things. It was a subtle change in attitude and approach, not in actions, and I wanted to prepare for when her affair really breaks down and affects the children. For me, the past year has been marked by several changes. I became more physically fit than ever, my stamina and resilience increased significantly. I went back to the doctor for another checkup, and he said whatever I was doing, keep it up. I smiled, thinking that Britt was the reason for this turn in my life. I had something to prove. Side note, I was tested for diseases every 3 months at a private clinic separate from my regular doctor. Fortunately, every test came back negative. I also took up several activities to improve my mental health. I became interested in rock climbing, took a few courses to learn some basic technical skills, and worked on my upper body. This didn't come easily for me, as I had a slight fear of heights. To overcome this fear, I took up parachuting. Stepping out of a plane with a parachute on your back and a reserve parachute on your front makes your heart race. I spent 3 weekends at the local parachute club, did 6 jumps, and got to the point where I looked forward to the excitement of the jump. It was fun. Interestingly, we don't have any real mountains nearby, but there are some areas where you can learn the basics. I did this and decided that climbing was not for me, so I moved on. Another thing I did was buy a motor home and a truck to pull it with. I purchased the trailer from Grand Design. It is about 30 feet long and has a comfortable queen-size bed in the front and 4 bunk beds in the rear. The best thing about it is the bathroom, kitchen, dining area, and sofa. All the comforts of home were carried behind the truck. The truck is a large Dodge Ram with a diesel engine. When I hook up the trailer to the truck, it pulls like it's not even there. This truck is a monster and a lot of fun to drive. Britt was against buying a trailer and truck, but the kids were thrilled when I took them to an RV show. I hooked up the trailer and we headed out for a weekend of fun at national and state parks. I dislike being at private campgrounds where the campers are packed like cattle. I prefer open spaces where I can breathe fresh air and my kids can run around and get dirty. Britt came with us a few times but now rarely joins. She has a job and clients to keep an eye on, or at least that's what she says. At home, I quietly began to change the way I interacted with Britt. The closeness between us diminished. After having children, the reality of busy lives and careers meant that we were often too exhausted for close interactions. At least that's what I thought. Our physical intimacy had become a sacrifice. I tried changing things up a bit, hoping to increase the level of closeness in our relationship. After all, I had competition in this race. If I lose, the consequences will be great. If I win, I'll have more options. My tactics for achieving this goal involve the salami method. If you're not familiar with it, let me explain briefly. The salami method involves tackling a large task one small piece at a time. If you go to the supermarket and buy a huge sausage, people might think you're crazy if you plan to eat it all at once. But if you ask the butcher to cut it into thin slices, it's easier to manage and enjoy over time. Similarly, I tried to treat my wife differently than before. I paid more attention to her and listened carefully to what she said, memorizing it. I tried not to let her get lost in the daily hustle and bustle. Sometimes I would involve the kids in household tasks to reduce the number of things Britt and I had to do. Children now have responsibilities, such as laundry and trash, which is a start. It's not unusual to ask your kids to clean up after themselves, so I did, and eventually Britt started doing it too. Once a week at work, I took a few minutes to review my plan, took notes, and kept a calendar. I planned things so they wouldn't get lost in the bustle of life. One Wednesday, I proposed a date idea for us. We hadn't gone out to dinner or a movie in months. Britt's response was a bit muted, but she went along with the plan. When Saturday arrived, we went to a new place for dinner and then watched a movie she had chosen. It was a pleasant evening, and when we got home, I poured us some wine and made sure to maintain eye contact as we talked. We were easy with each other, more relaxed than in recent months. I circled the date on the calendar every time Britt and I had a close moment. I was pleased to see that lately, there were many more red circles appearing on the calendar pages than before. Now, I was feeling more successful in my efforts. I wondered if Britt was still seeing her lover. I knew I was happier, but I continued to keep the children as a priority. I never lost sight of this. Britt was still a good mother, she worked hard but never ignored her children. We had dinner together several times a week and always on Sundays. This was our time together to discuss the coming week and plan who would do what. It all felt so homey and normal, and to me, it was all about being a family. I've been working out a lot at the gym, and my gym has great spin classes. I started going to classes about 3 months ago. The instructor, Kim, is about 22 or 23 years old and teaches excellent cycling classes. The first time I went, I thought it would be easy, but 15 minutes later, I was out of breath and realized it was much more challenging than it seemed. There were about 10 to 12 people in the class, and they all actively participated, shouting and cheering when they reached difficult parts. After 45 minutes of class, I was exhausted and excited at the same time. I thanked Kim for teaching me a lot about cycling that I didn't know. I continued to take spinning classes twice a week for the next 3 months, and during this time, my ability and endurance improved significantly. I noticed there was always a core group of people, mostly middle-aged women and a few men. One day after class, Kim approached me and asked if I could fill in as a substitute instructor, as she would be away for a while and there was no other spin instructor at the gym. If no replacement was found, the classes would be canceled, and it might take several months before a new instructor was found. I agreed to try it, though I mentioned there might be times when I would be busy and not able to be there. I taught cycling classes twice a week. The first few times were a definite learning experience, but everyone knew I was just a substitute for Kim and had a sense of humor about it. About 3 weeks into my stint, one of the participants approached me after class and commented, "I don't know what you do, but some people really appreciate your classes. Have you noticed that the class is always full now? There are many more women here than before, and there's even a waiting list to sign up." I was shocked by his observation. I'm no different from many men at the gym, about 6 feet tall and weighing 165 pounds. I'm in shape but not particularly muscular. During the next class, I observed the participants and noticed that some women did look at me more intently. This was new to me and a bit unsettling. I wondered if Kim had experienced something similar and if she enjoyed being the focus of attention. The trend continued with several women wanting to talk to me before and after class. I couldn't understand this sudden popularity, but I tried to focus on other activities. I got back into cycling, bought a new road bike, and invested in proper riding gear. I made sure I had lights on the front and back of the bike. The headlights seemed like targets for drivers who don't know how to share the road with a bicycle. If I'm ever elected, I'll push for more bike lanes and increased penalties for drivers who don't respect cyclists. Britt now does a lot more than she used to. She works out every day and is in better shape than ever. Her overall stamina has improved, and it has positively impacted our life. Britt has taken on new activities without discussing them with me first. She went to an RV show and bought a large trailer, and then she bought a big truck to tow it. The kids love it and enjoy going to campgrounds and parks. I join them a few times, but work always gets in the way, and I'm not as enthusiastic about nature as they are. Besides, I need to compensate for the time I spend with Dean during the week, which means working an extra hour or more almost every night and more on the weekends. I have to keep this hidden from Rachel, my boss, so I work on my own time. Everything changed with Cal. First, I need to tell you about my friend Tommy. His full name is Thomas Fairfield March, and he's my best friend. We grew up together, learned together, and were like brothers, despite having different families. Tommy was the best man at my wedding, and I was the best man at his. When we were teenagers, we got into trouble together and always had each other's backs. While I was studying accountancy at university, Tommy was studying to become an architect. I stayed in Albany after school and worked for a big firm, while Tommy went to work here. After a couple of years, he was offered a job with an international company in Melbourne, Australia. Tommy often called me at any time of the day, not remembering the 15-hour time difference and the international date line. When it's daytime here, it's nighttime in Melbourne, and vice versa. Tommy went to Melbourne and quickly realized that the future there was in construction, as the country was prospering and expanding rapidly. He worked to create his own company to handle everything from concept to design, construction, and even renovation. Tommy had been married, but he and his wife separated and divorced before he left, as they had different life plans. They didn't have children, so it was inevitable they would go separate ways. Sherry, Tommy's ex, also had an affair with a dentist. Tommy put together a business plan and secured funding from family in New York and a venture capital group in Australia. However, he still needed more skilled workers and a business manager. This is where I came into the picture. Tommy called me frequently with lists of questions and asked for my advice. I did my best to help him and suggested he consult a lawyer to navigate the regulations for starting a business in Australia. Tommy laughed and said, "Get ready and come here as soon as possible." I was shocked. He wanted me to come to Melbourne to be the business manager and help him launch the business. He wanted us to succeed and become rich and powerful. I took a deep breath, surprised by the offer. Tommy said I was the person he trusted the most after his parents, and he needed me to be a partner in this venture. We talked for another 2 hours, and then I sat at my desk with a notepad, planning. I drank 3 bottles of water, ate a sandwich, and ignored the many people peeking through my door, wondering what I was doing. These were definitely not billable hours for the company. I focused on taking notes and checking things online. By the end of the day, as I was getting ready to go home, I texted Tommy, "I have a rough plan. I'll let you know when I'm on my way." That evening at home, I didn't mention anything about taking a vacation and going to Melbourne for a month. Britt was herself, and we talked about everything we usually discuss at and after dinner. I helped with homework and put the kids to bed. I prepared lunches for the next day for them and for myself, cleaned the house, started the laundry, and turned on the dishwasher. Everything was very normal. The next day at work, I called my lawyer and made an appointment to discuss my plan and what I needed to do. I spoke with my boss and agreed on 60 days of unpaid leave. I wasn't sure I'd need all this time, but we agreed. His look read, "You're clearly not telling me a lot," but he didn't really have a choice. Either give me a vacation or lose me now forever. Next, I took out my passport and made sure it was valid for 6 months beyond the date I expected to return to Albany. The following day, I contacted Katherine Johnson and asked her to come see me. We talked, and I asked her to keep an eye on Britt's activities while I was gone. She was to send me weekly reports via email. I wanted to ensure my absence wouldn't be an opportunity for Britt to invite her lover into our home. If this happened, my plan was immediate divorce. Katherine was also supposed to send weekly reports to Leanne, and if anything happened, the divorce papers would be delivered 3 days later. When I returned home from work, I started cooking dinner. I was making spaghetti with meat sauce when Britt walked through the door with a briefcase and phone in hand. She quickly greeted me. The children sat at the dining table, doing homework and preparing for their evening classes. Laura was going to soccer practice, and Diane was going to Scouts. Di was free, so he helped carry our folding chairs and water bottles to the playground. When we all got home, I noticed Britt was still at her laptop, sorting out documents and emails. I gave the kids a snack before bed, sent them to the shower, put on their pajamas, brushed their teeth, and then let them read before turning out the lights. I went to the refrigerator, found a bottle of wine, and poured 2 glasses. I entered the office and placed one of the glasses in front of her, then sat down on the sofa. "Britt, we need to talk," I said. She took a small sip of wine and looked at me. My face must have given away my serious expression. "Who is Dean Billings?" I asked. Britt gasped and dropped her wine glass, spilling a little wine on her clothes. She didn't move. "How long have you been in a relationship with him?" I asked. There was silence. Her mouth was open, but no words came out. "I think I have a good idea, more than 2 years," I said, letting her absorb this. Then I asked, "Are you leaving us?" Still nothing. "It's the 21st century, and I don't own you. I can't order you to do anything, so I guess you can do whatever you want. If you don't want to be with me, all you have to do is tell me. I can take the hint." I took a sip of my wine. "I turned a blind eye to this for too long, hoping that you would end things with him. But I know that during my absence, you spent even more time with him. Did you bring him here to this house?" She quietly answered, "No." "Thank you for not bringing him to my children," I said. We sat in silence for what seemed like a long time, but in reality, it was only half a minute. I handed her the large envelope. "Here are the documents I need to give you. They explain everything clearly. Now you can spend as much time with him as you want. It doesn't matter now." Finally, she was able to speak again. "I don't want a divorce. I want my family. I love you all very much. I don't want to lose you." I answered sharply, "You have a strange way of showing your love for us." I waited, but she didn't say anything. "I've waited almost 2 damn years for you to either end things with him or tell me the truth about wanting to be with him. So what is it?" "I'm not sure you even know," I said, moving the envelope closer to her. I told her she needed to see a lawyer the next day. I stood up, finished the rest of the wine in my glass, and left the room. As I left, I added, You can sleep in the guest room until we sort some things out, Britt. Here you go. I'm done, figuratively speaking, not literally. I was so sure that I had kept Dean hidden from Cam so well that my two worlds would never intersect. Now they had collided. What the hell should I do now? Why did I even start dating Dean? It was a big mistake. How to fix this? I heard Cam moving my things into the guest bedroom. He made a few trips, and I realized that my world had collapsed, and I was the one who pulled the trigger. I slowly opened the envelope marked claim for divorce. There was a business card attached to the top right corner, Cam's lawyer. Cam wasn't going to put up with my actions. I was overcome with a feeling of helplessness. I was caught. I thought, why did I do this? I knew why. Dean was charming and attentive, and I was lonely, needing attention beyond what small children could offer. Cam worked 60-hour weeks, and my schedule was all over the place. We never had time for each other, and when we did, the moments of intimacy were brief, overshadowed by the reality of 3 kids, 2 jobs, and bills to pay. Dean was attractive, had a killer smile, and connected with me in a way my family did not. At first, I planned to stop after a couple of months. I knew it was wrong. He had a girlfriend with whom he was semi-serious, but they stopped dating suddenly. He didn't talk much about the breakup but wanted to spend more time with me. I loved the attention and did nothing to stop it. Oh, I just realized it must have been his ex-girlfriend who went to Cam and told him everything. Oh my God, Cam must have been in shock. Now, all the changes he made in his life made sense. He needed to protect himself. Everything he had done in the last year had led up to this evening. I didn't do anything to prevent it. In fact, I made everything worse. As I looked through the documents Cam handed me, the only thing that caught my eye was that Cam wanted custody of the children. The lawsuit stated he had been the primary caregiver for the past 4 years, performing most of the parental responsibilities. He was willing to offer me liberal visitation if I wanted it. I was going to lose my children. I couldn't let this happen. I was going to lose my husband. I didn't want that. My stomach churned. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. As I leaned over the toilet, I realized that, along with the contents of my stomach, my life was going down the drain. I called my mother and father to tell them I was going to divorce Britt. They were shocked and wanted to know why. When I told them Britt had been cheating on me with another man for some time, they didn't want to believe it. They both offered any help they could, but I didn't reveal my final plan to them. Leanne made sure Britt's lawyer was involved in the negotiations and that the terms I proposed were discussed. In New York, the law does not address adultery as a reason for divorce. You can get a divorce simply because you want one. In practice, everything is decided through behind-the-scenes negotiations and the division of property and life. I didn't care about our things, including the house. I was willing to split everything in half. She takes half, I take half. But when it came to the children, I was not going to give in. The children stayed with me, and that was the final decision. Laura is almost 12 years old, Diana is 10, and Davy is 7 but acts like a teenager. It's difficult with him. I sat down with the kids and told them a simplified version of the truth. I wanted to preserve Britt's dignity and ensure they continued to respect their mother. Laura was very aware of divorce among her friends and classmates and knew what it meant. She told me, in front of her sister and brother, that she wanted to live with me. Diana and Davy looked at Laura and then at me and said they also wanted to live with me. I was proud of my children. I have never been prouder of their support. The next few weeks were tense, to say the least. Britt and I lived in separate bedrooms, and although we were polite to each other, that was the limit of our communication. Several times Britt came to the bedroom door and asked if she could come in. "Were you with your lover?" I asked. When she didn't answer, I told her to leave. About a week later, I told Britt that I had talked to the kids and that we needed to talk as a family. She didn't want to, but I insisted because I wanted her to face the truth about the mess she had created. The next evening, I prepared dinner, and we all sat down at the table. "Okay, I have a few things everyone needs to hear," I said. They all stopped eating and looked at me. "I think it's time for Mom to find a new place to live. Our divorce date is coming up very soon, and I think that's the next step. Until then." Britt looked at the table, and the children looked at her. Laura spoke first. "Mom, why did you stop loving us?" Those words were like a knife to Britt's heart. "Darling, I never stopped loving you." "I love you all very much," Britt said. "But you don't love Daddy?" Laura asked. "Yes, I love him," Britt replied, but her voice faltered. My daughter knew how to get to the heart of the matter as only an innocent child can. "But then why are you with another man?" Britt couldn't speak. I. "Kids," I said, "I think we should finish eating and then get ready for baseball practice at Davies." Britt almost ran out of the room. Her decisions began to catch up with her. Her actions had consequences, and her own children taught her a hard lesson about them. I still had a few things left to complete by the end of this marriage. So, the last days of our marriage arrived. All details had been worked out. I planned to sell the house within a few months of the end of the marriage and move to Melbourne with the children. Britt objected at first, but after she realized that the children wanted to be with me, she withdrew her objections. Leanne received a notarized letter from Britt's lawyer confirming her consent to the move. Immigration officials required this as proof that I was not kidnapping my children and running away. I continued working at the firm during the day and for Tommy at night and on weekends. Who needs sleep? It is highly overrated. I gradually sold all the furniture in the house that neither Britt nor I wanted. I gave the kids 2 large plastic boxes each, one for things they wanted to take to Melbourne other than their luggage, and the second for memorabilia they wanted to keep with their grandparents. They would eventually need these things, and my parents quickly agreed to store them. Britt moved from a house to an apartment. The children helped her load her things into the rented van. I thought her new partner would help her, but he was nowhere to be seen. I offered her any furniture from the house that she wanted: pots, pans, beds, a sofa. All this was available to her. I didn't need any of it. Apart from the 2 crates for the kids, everything else would be sold or given away. I noticed that she took our wedding photo album. I wasn't sure what to do with it, so I decided to let her keep it. I no longer wore my wedding ring. In fact, I gave it back to Britt when she moved out of our former home. Now that the divorce was almost finalized, there was no need for it. Several women at the firm noticed this change, and later I observed that some of them were clearly watching me. My divorce was no secret. I didn't ask Britt to return the engagement and wedding rings I had given her. If she wanted them back, I probably would have taken them, but what could I do with them? Leanne mentioned that the court views engagement and wedding rings as gifts, and so it is up to the recipient what to do with them. So it was up to Britt. Weeks passed, and preparations continued for our move to Melbourne. I tried to keep the children's lives as normal as possible. Britt took the kids with her a few times, but never overnight. She rented a 1-room apartment because soon the children would no longer be around to stay with her. It was all very strange to me, and even Laura told me that her mother seemed so different. It was incredibly surreal to get rid of all our family belongings, both large items and countless small things that we had accumulated during our time together. I offered everything Britt might want, asked family and friends if there was anything they needed, and suggested I just give it to them. I then held a house sale and invited people to come and buy anything they might need. I tried to get a reasonable price for things we had paid good money for, but many people were looking for bargains. Knowing it was a sale, they tried to reduce the price of the remaining large items. I kept the children's beds until the last minute because they needed somewhere to sleep. Finally, when everything of value was sold, I invited a charity to take what they wanted. The rest went into the trash container. It was a moment when you realize that a significant chapter of your life is ending when you throw your things away. It was a hard day. The children even helped me with this, and they were sad to see some things go. Some of our relatives offered to keep some items, but in reality, we needed to cut ties and move on. I didn't ask Britt about her life after she moved. She had kept most of her life private and away from me for over 2 years, so I decided that now I didn't care what she did. If she wanted to share something with me, she could have done so. During all the time since her affair was revealed, Britt never expressed any remorse. I never wanted to discuss our marriage and what was lacking in it that led her to seek someone else. My anger had subsided over time, and I had given up hope that she might have been willing to make an effort to keep the family together. If she didn't want the family enough to make even a small effort, there was no point in my efforts. Our marriage was over. I never told her, but I did a DNA test on the children. I was almost certain they were mine, but after discovering her deceit, I began to question everything. I was very relieved to see the results. On the day the divorce was finalized, Leanne called and said she had a court order ready for me to pick up or she could courier it. I was passing by her building, so I stopped in and collected it. She congratulated me, and we had drinks in her office to celebrate. I thanked her for her work and gave her a final check for her services. It wasn't cheap, but it was worth it. I was impressed with how she managed to convince Britt to agree to let the kids move to Australia with me. Leanne admitted that it took some pressure and a warning about how the situation could become very awkward for Britt if the details became known to her family, friends, and employers. To save face, it was better for Britt to agree to the move. Nothing prevented Britt from visiting her children in Australia. The flight to Melbourne was an adventure for the children. They were real troopers, and even though the journey was long, they never complained. Davy spent a lot of time staring out the window, watching the clouds, the land, and the ocean. Tommy met us at the airport in a large van to take us and our pile of luggage to our temporary home. He had hired a real estate agent to find a suitable rental house near a good school, just minutes from his home and close to grocery stores, doctors, and dentists. There was minimal furniture in the house, but for the first time, it was enough. I told the kids they would have a few days off before school started so we could relax, explore the area, and get to know our new home. Being a single father is a challenge. It's one thing to manage this in Albany where my family is nearby, but it's a completely different situation in another country. I had no support system other than Tommy in case of an emergency, which bothered me more than I expected. I was careful in everything I did and realized I was being a bit paranoid. Laura took on more and more responsibility, looking after her sister and younger brother. At 12, she was like a miniature adult and became my little helper. She even tried to cook and made sure her siblings kept the house tidy. She grew up quickly. The children started at a new school, and after meeting with their teachers, I became more confident that we could manage in our new country. The children were surprised at how different yet similar everything was. Only a few days after arriving, Davy began experimenting with new words. It was funny to hear him try out his Australian accent and say things like damn with and without reason. "Dad, let's have a barbecue this weekend," he said, and I almost died laughing. The work was gaining momentum at the same time the construction business was booming, and we had more work than we could handle. This meant we needed to expand. We had clients that we couldn't afford to disappoint due to the size of the projects they wanted us to undertake. To avoid losing them to competitors, we needed to hire additional workers, purchase 2 more trucks and trailers, and buy more equipment. One of the contracts was for constructing 30 back porches on houses in a new, upscale community. These verandas were large, multi-level, and had to be made from composite boards, which were part plastic and designed to never fade or rot. This material was expensive, so our workers had to be very precise in measuring and cutting to minimize waste and protect our profits. We brought in 2 of our most experienced decking crews and supplemented them with less experienced workers. We also hired a full-time tiler for interior work and several other specialists. To meet demand, we bought a loader and tractor with a bucket on one end and a digger on the other, along with a trailer for transporting it to construction sites. We found that making our own door and window moldings, as well as cornice moldings for ceilings, was more cost-effective than purchasing them. After a factory producing these materials burned down, I found the necessary equipment in New Zealand and shipped it here. Installation and testing took a few days, but once our carpenter got the hang of it, we began making all the moldings we needed at a fraction of the cost. The byproduct of the molding shop was large amounts of sawdust, so we invested in a machine that presses sawdust mixed with a small amount of paraffin wax into rectangular blocks. These blocks can be used as fuel in stoves or fireplaces, providing a way to recycle sawdust and generate additional income. We contracted to sell these blocks to home improvement stores in the region, and they quickly became popular. Later, we discovered that using a more powerful hydraulic press allowed us to eliminate the need for paraffin wax and produce even better blocks that burned for hours, increasing our profits further. It's been almost a year since we arrived in Australia. The company was thriving, and we were making good money with over 30 employees. Tommy and I decided to start buying out his parents' share of the company, and then work on buying out the investor's share. His parents wanted to travel more and buy a holiday home in Italy, so it worked out well for all of us. I used some of the money I had left after the divorce to buy out part of his parents' share, giving me 20% of the company. Tommy held 55%, leaving our silent investors with 25%. Although Tommy was still making the final decisions for the company, we were on the same page and decided to reward our employees as profits grew. We introduced profit-sharing plans, which meant that at the end of the year, the checks issued were a nice bonus for everyone. The profit in the first year was modest but promising, and we just needed to maintain it. We had a Christmas party at the warehouse, handing out checks and enjoying a catered dinner. My children were there to celebrate. In Australia, summer holidays begin at the end of the year, which is the opposite of the US. Christmas falls during the summer holidays, and this year, the school break was from December 21st to January 27th, a much longer break than we were used to. I had planned a few adventures for us, including backpacking trips, a few days at the beach, learning to sail, and a short caravan holiday, which is like a mobile home for Americans. However, our plans changed on December 22nd at around 7 p.m. Right after dinner, the doorbell rang. Laura shouted, "I'll open it," and I heard her say, "What are you doing here?" The tone in her voice made it clear that she was very surprised. I dried my hands with a towel and walked to the front door. To my astonishment, standing in front of me was my ex-wife, Britt. I was caught completely off guard. My shock must have been evident, as Laura looked at me and said, "I guess it's your business," before walking away. I saw Laura, Diana, and Davy come into the living room and look at their mother. They didn't move towards her, they were just as shocked as I was. When I came to my senses, I motioned for Britt to come in. She had a small suitcase on wheels, which she placed at the entrance and then removed the handle. She was dressed nicely in jeans and a button-down shirt. She looked tired, but, I admit, she looked good. We all just stood there, not knowing where to start. "Well, Britt, I won't lie. I'm surprised to see you. It's been a year, and you've come a long way, so this must be important." Britt had called the children every few weeks to talk to them, and I'd emailed her the best times to call, considering the time difference. If she had just picked up the phone, there would have been no guarantee where the kids might be, at school, sleeping, or otherwise occupied. I wanted Britt to stay in touch with the kids. She was still their mother. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights, but she met my gaze and said, "I want to come home." "What?" Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the children looking at each other, their eyes wide and their expressions full of surprise as they tried to understand what was happening. I knew I had to give Britt a chance to explain. "How long have you been in Melbourne?" "I just flew in and came here straight from the airport." "Better come in, and we'll make you something to eat." I waved for the kids to come over, and they ran towards Britt, hugging her all at once. It made me happy to see that they still had feelings for their mother, even if her feelings for them were questionable. What kind of caring mother doesn't see her children for a whole year? The next few days were challenging, but the children were happy to see their mother after the long separation. Britt had brought small Christmas gifts for each of them, and they spent the next few days reconnecting. I tried to stay out of the way and give Britt time with them. On the second day, Laura, my always wise daughter, quietly asked me why her mother had come to Australia now. I thought for a few seconds before answering. I can only assume that Britt was lonely without her children and wanted to spend time with them. That second night, after the kids went to bed, I asked Britt to talk with me. I poured us a drink, and we sat in the family room. "So, are you enjoying being with the kids again? They're excited to see you." She took a sip of her drink. "Thank you for letting me stay. I meant it when I said I wanted to come home. You and the kids are my home, no matter where it is. I want you all in my life again, and I want to be in your life. My life wouldn't be the same without you. What happened to your boyfriend? Are you still with him? I haven't seen him since we got divorced." I realized how foolish I was. I let my needs ruin my life and deprive me of my family. I want another chance. I want to be your wife again and a mother to these 3 children. I want it so badly that I'll do whatever it takes for you to take me back." She took a long sip of her drink. I took a sip as well and tried to formulate a response. It wasn't just a simple matter of saying, "Okay, you're back." I had serious reservations and didn't want to feel the betrayal I experienced when I discovered she was involved with another man before our divorce. "I waited a long time for you to change your mind about being with your boyfriend." I tried to be patient and look the other way, thinking that if I gave you space, you'd realize you were risking our family and future. I tried to improve myself and be a better husband and partner, but none of that seemed to matter to you. When I was here in Melbourne last year, and you took the opportunity to spend even more time with him, that was the end for me. How do you propose to bring us back together?" Britt thought for a moment. "I tried to make a plan before I came here. I thought I'd throw myself at your feet and swear I'd be better and never make the same mistakes again. But I know that's not a real plan. I understand it will take rebuilding trust, and it won't happen overnight. It will be a lot of work, but I'm ready. I know it will be a lot of work, but I'm ready. The ones you'll have to work hardest to rebuild trust with will be those 3 kids sleeping upstairs. They were very brave during the divorce. They tried really hard to carry on without their mother. They were what got me through it all. From the moment I found out about your romance, they were wonderful. Moving to Australia and never complaining about the chaos in their lives, I felt my eyes start to water as I talked about my children." Britt nodded in understanding. "Last year was the worst year of my life. When I found out about my affair, I thought Cam didn't care because he was so controlled with his emotions. But he became cold and distant. Can I blame him? He had time to plan everything, and he did it well. I didn't know what to do. Unbeknownst to me, I lost my entire family, and they moved away. Last year was hell. I miss my kids and life with Cam. I realized too late that he is a much better person than I am. Yes, we planned these children together, and yes, I gave birth to them and am their mother, or at least I was, until I lost my whole family. I became foolish and alone. I want to be part of my family again, so badly. I've spent the last year attending weekly therapy sessions to try to figure things out. What do I really want?" This was her question to me. I tried for a long time to justify my actions, but then I realized how misguided I had been. A friend pointed this out to me one evening in a bar with colleagues. The conversation turned to me, and she asked how often I heard from Cam and the kids since they moved to Australia. I tried to dodge the question, but she persisted, asking how often I called my children, if I planned to visit them, and what my plans were for the holidays. Her point was clear. I had ruined everything so badly that my ex-husband took the children and moved as far away as possible. The therapist basically said the same thing, only in more clinical terms. She tried to get me to articulate what I wanted for the future of my marriage and family, given my choices. How did I envision combining these 2 lives? Did I want other relationships? Was there a way for Cam to understand my needs? I didn't have any answers. I was so confused. The conflict came to a head during my first Thanksgiving and Christmas without my husband and children. The divorce was finalized, Cam and the kids moved to Australia, and I was left alone in a studio apartment. I focused on work and still saw Dean, who eventually said he was tired of our meetings and that the excitement had worn off. He started dating someone new and decided we needed to end things. It was ironic. On Thanksgiving Day, I was alone. I didn't have time to visit my parents, and my mother didn't insist I come to them as she had when the children were with me. We talked, but the conversation was mostly about the children, how they were doing, if they liked Australia, what they were up to, and so on. My mother asked what time I would arrive, but she didn't invite me to Thanksgiving dinner, which implied that I would come if I could or wanted to. I went to my brother's house where he and his wife were with their 2 children. My brother was polite but looked at me strangely. My sister-in-law, Kat, was more direct. When we were alone, she asked, "How did you lose your family so easily? Did you even fight for them? Did you care enough about your marriage and children to do anything about it?" She raised her hand to stop me from answering, saying, "I know what you were doing. I hope it was worth the price you paid." She then left with her children. Later, after my brother and father had a few beers while watching football, my brother said, "Damn it, sister, I thought you were smarter." You lost your family to cheating." He turned and left. For Christmas, I was too afraid to go home, so I spent it alone in my apartment. Christmas dinner was a ham and cheese sandwich and a bottle of wine. My colleagues avoided me when planning holiday get-togethers. There was a lot of partying and drinking. I went to a couple of events, but the conversation always turned to plans with my family. I usually left early. So here I am, feeling like a fool who lost her family due to a misguided relationship. I lost my husband's love, his respect, my children, and my home, all for something that ultimately wasn't worth it. I continued seeing a therapist twice a week, which helped me realize what I truly wanted. I wanted to reclaim what I had lost, my family, their love, and my place in their lives. I wanted this nightmare to end and to wake up to my husband and children living a normal life again. I deeply regret the choices I made. What seemed exciting at the time was ultimately a secret that hurt my family. I thought it was just harmless fun, but it took a toll on my family life. I've noticed Cam doing things he hadn't done before, like taking up new hobbies. I initially thought he was having a breakdown, but now I understand he was trying to move on from what happened. I didn't realize he knew about my actions. Cam made decisions to create new memories for himself and the kids. He bought a large trailer and a truck to tow it and took them camping. I initially resented this because it symbolized his control over our family life. But I see now that the kids loved it. They were excited to go with him and have fun. I pretended to be busy with work, which led to a lonely existence without them. It's not surprising they wanted to stay with their father. They saw him as the dependable one who did things with them. Laura observed me closely, trying to gauge if I wanted them enough to fight for them. It was clear I hadn't fought hard enough. I needed to fix this, and I had nothing to lose by coming to Melbourne. I had to find out if my children wanted me in their lives. I knew Cam wouldn't want me back, as he initiated the divorce, but he was polite and didn't tell our families the full truth. He told my parents that we had grown apart, sparing them the details of my mistakes. The move to Melbourne was risky. I worried about Cam possibly having a new partner, refusing to let me see the kids, or if the kids wouldn't want to see me at all. If things didn't work out, I would just return to my previous life. When Cam let me into the house, I was overwhelmed. My children hugged me, and I couldn't stop crying. It felt like being released from a prison. I didn't want to let them go. Cam made me something to eat, though I barely remember it. I was in a state of exhaustion. That night, I struggled to sleep. Cam offered me a room, which was Davy's. He would sleep on an air mattress in the room with his father. I tried to fall asleep but couldn't stop my racing thoughts. Davy came to the door and asked if he could sleep with me. I was in tears as he climbed into bed, and we hugged tightly. I never wanted to let him go. This was the beginning of trying to rebuild our lives. Cam was understandably conflicted about my return. Part of him wanted to protect the children from further disruption. It had been a year since I had last seen them, and I had only managed to send gifts on their birthdays. Now that I was here, Cam and I needed to have a serious conversation about what I wanted. I got up early the next morning, made myself a cup of espresso, and prepared for the day. Since moving here, I had grown accustomed to the strong coffee I made with my espresso machine. It was a small comfort that helped me organize my day before sending the kids to school and heading to work. Fortunately, we had school holidays for Christmas. I planned some camping trips, a visit to the beach, and a sailing adventure with the kids. To the beach and try their hand at sailing. I heard Davy's room door open, and a moment later, I heard the toilet flushing. Britt appeared around the corner and asked if I would like some coffee. Without saying a word, I turned and made her a cup of espresso. "Thanks, Cam. This coffee is great," she said. I discovered this machine shortly after we moved here. I have another coffee maker, but this one is much better. I stood on the kitchen side of the island, and Britt sat on a stool on the other side. Britt looked around, probably noticing that the house was rather sparsely furnished. We had the essentials, but I hadn't had the time, inclination, or funds to furnish it more fully. "Last night, you said you wanted to go home. What did you mean by that?" I asked. Britt took a long sip of her coffee and looked me straight in the eye. For the first time in a long while, I felt that she was sincere in her words and emotions. She spoke about how much she missed the children and even me. I had questions. So, you and I are divorced. Do you have someone now? No, Cam, I don't have another man in my life, Britt replied. When you broke up with your boyfriend, what was his name? I broke up with him before our divorce, she said. I was somewhat surprised by this answer. How long have you been here? As long as you allow me, she said. I want to be a mother to the children again and would like to be your wife again. She paused and asked, Are you with someone right now? I raised both hands with palms up and gestured around the house. Do you see anyone here other than us? Britt looked around the kitchen. No, I guess that answers your question. The last 2 years, my life has been dedicated solely to taking care of my children and helping me get my business started. Other than that, no, I don't have anyone in my life. I just didn't have time for a relationship. It's not that I don't want one, it will become important again soon, I said. But here was Britt, with whom I had a long history, saying she wanted to be part of our lives again. I exhaled, took a sip of coffee, and asked, So, do you want to move here? I thought for a moment about what needed to be done. I needed to talk to the kids about this. It would have a significant impact on them. Having a mother again could be very beneficial, especially for them as they grew up. I did some research online to better understand how to support my daughters as they got older. I even considered asking one of the women at the construction company for advice. She is a single mother and could probably offer some valuable insights. Laura is almost 13, and I could see she was becoming a young woman. Maybe Britt's presence would be good for the kids. I just wasn't sure I could handle her presence if she wasn't willing to change. I wasn't ready to experience that pain again, as I was just beginning to recover from the last time. The day passed quickly. The children got up, had breakfast, and helped with household chores. They walked around their mother as if they couldn't believe she was really there. Davy wasn't on the air mattress when I got up, so I looked around the house for him and then realized he might be in his room. I quietly looked in and found him asleep, cuddled up to his mother. I knew Laura would have the hardest time accepting her mother back. She is very smart and had taken on many responsibilities that a typical 12-year-old might not have. She encouraged her siblings, monitored their homework, took the lead in cleaning the kitchen, and helped with various tasks. She was irreplaceable to me, and now her mother's sudden presence was confusing. It remained to be seen whether Britt would stay for more than a few days or leave again. I had planned a day hike north of the city, and, of course, when breakfast was finished, Laura reminded Diana and Davy to pack their backpacks and brush their teeth. I could hardly contain my laughter. I watched Britt, who wisely stayed out of the way. I told Britt about our plans, and she asked if she could come with us. I looked at the kids and said she could. When we went outside to get into the truck, Laura went to the front passenger door as usual. Britt seemed a bit embarrassed. I looked at Laura and asked, Do you mind if your mother sits here today? Laura rolled her eyes and sighed heavily, as if to say, Whatever you want, and walked to the back seat of the truck. My truck is a 2010 Toyota Hilux model, known as a crew cab in the US. It's similar to the Toyota Tacoma but has the steering wheel on the right side and runs on diesel with a manual transmission. We went to the Dandenong Mountain Lookout Tower to take some photos and then hiked in the area. Melbourne is surrounded by many national parks with breathtaking views. We had already done some walks along the coast, and the tower was on the children's list of places they wanted to see. I packed lunches and water bottles for everyone and made an extra one for Britt. The children had their own backpacks with the necessary items. I grabbed a first aid kit, a couple of foil emergency blankets, and made sure to bring raincoats and hats. These were mandatory for every trip. Britt was clearly nervous. This was the first time in 18 months she had done anything with the children. One of the last family activities we did together was in the camper I bought, which she hated and only used twice. By then, our marriage was already on the decline, and she made excuses not to participate in family activities. Today, there was no way to avoid it. If she wanted to reconnect with the children, she would need to embrace it. Davy took his mother's hand as we walked, wanting to make sure she stayed close. Diana walked with her for most of the hike, chatting about all the things 10-year-olds discuss. Laura stayed close to me, and I could see she wanted to talk. When we separated from the others a bit, she asked directly, Dad, How long will she stay? I don't know, I replied. I think she wants to be part of the family again. She really misses you and Diana and Davy. I know Davy misses her a lot, and I think Diana does too. What about you? Laura asked with a serious expression. I missed her, but I'm not sure if I miss her now, I admitted. She abandoned us all, me, Davy, Diana, and even you. Why did she do that, Dad? I took a deep breath. I wish I knew, honey. I wish I knew. All I know is that she made bad decisions that affected the whole family, and for that, she is truly sorry. She realizes now that she wants to be with you. Does she want to be with you too? Laura asked with surprising insight. I don't know about that, I said. Do you want to be with her? We had too many questions for now. Let's enjoy the hike while the weather is nice, I suggested, avoiding the difficult question. We climbed to the top of the observation tower, took some photos, and ate our lunches. Then we hiked to the waterfall, spraying everyone generously with mosquito repellent due to the common mosquito-borne viruses in Victoria. Britt grimaced as she was sprayed, and the kids laughed at her reaction. We all smelled like repellent until we got home and showered. It was a pleasant walk, and we reconnected with each other. That evening, Davy wanted his mother to read to him before bed. After he fell asleep, she came out and sat on the kitchen island to talk with me. This was a continuation of our morning conversation. I heard Laura walk down the hall to the bathroom and then back to the bedroom she shared with her sister. I brought Britt and myself a bottle of beer each, since we had no wine in the house. I handed her the beer, and she took a sip. Did you enjoy the day with the kids? I asked. I know Davy did, and Diana probably did too. Laura will be the hardest to convince that you are serious about being her mother again. Britt took a sip before she could respond. I continued, she felt very rejected by you, and so did I. Britt looked down at the table. How can I tell them that I want to be their mother again? She asked. I don't think you can just say it and expect them to understand. You have to show it. You have to be there for them and do what mothers do. You can't just play the role, you have to live it. I try to live the role of a father. I don't always do a good job, but the children are wonderful and help me every day. I couldn't do it without them. Britt looked at me seriously. I spent a lot of time trying to understand why you weren't good enough for me. I had to believe you were inadequate for me to want to spend time with someone else. But it took me a long time to realize that it was I who wasn't good enough for you. She took a long sip of her beer. The more you succeeded as a father, the less I felt I succeeded as a mother. It's hard to explain, but I thought your success was my failure. Part of me thought I was better off away from my family, so I turned to Dean. He was charming but lacked principles and values. He was unfaithful to a sweet girl for the sake of being involved with me, a married woman. I told myself it was just for fun and wouldn't affect you and the children. She took another sip. I didn't know how you found out about my unfaithfulness until the divorce, and then it became clear that his girlfriend must have told you. So, the truth was out. We both took a sip of our drinks. I shared a brief version of my experience, how I decided to wait and see if things would change, and when it became clear they wouldn't, I focused on coping with the stress and the humiliation of my wife wanting someone else. I felt like a failed husband, so I decided that if I couldn't save the marriage, I would save myself and the children. I went to the refrigerator and grabbed 2 more beers. If you want to return to your family, there are conditions. You can't just walk in and say you're back. Britt nodded. What do you want me to agree to? The first condition is loyalty to me and the children. Your past actions have affected us all. If you can't accept this, then we have nothing further to discuss. Britt expressed her desire to be my wife and their mother again. It was reassuring, though I knew that promises alone wouldn't suffice. The children needed stability and a mother in their lives. For the past year, I had been planning as if their mother would not be involved, focusing instead on creating a life for us. The physical distance had also affected Britt. Being far away meant she spent weekends and holidays alone. I understood how devastating it would be to be separated from my children, as they are the most tangible results of my life's work. If I fail as a father, nothing else matters. Helping to build something else is just an added benefit. What did you do about work? I asked. I took an indefinite break and told Rachel I might return depending on what you and the kids decide. As for the apartment, I put everything in storage. If you let me stay, I'll ask my father to sell everything. If not, I'll find a new place. That tiny apartment was depressing and cold. I couldn't stay there regardless. Britt had come with a small suitcase, but she mentioned that she had 3 larger ones shipped, which the airline was holding for her. If I can stay, I'll have them delivered. If not, I'll have them sent back. The second condition is communication. If you're unhappy with life with me, you should talk about it. Maybe we're not meant for each other, or perhaps we should be with someone else. Our marriage might be a mistake. But one thing I don't consider a mistake is our children. They are mine and real. I took a deep breath, feeling overwhelmed. The third condition is family therapy. We need a psychologist or therapist to help sort things out. My feelings are still very fresh, and your arrival has brought it all up again. I need to deal with it, and the children must be very confused. You need to talk to them both together and separately. When is the right time to do this? Tomorrow. Don't delay, but don't raise their hopes and then leave again. If you do, I don't know what I'll do, but I'll be very angry. We talked for a long time, and it was late when we finished. I went to bed, leaving Britt to handle things on her own. I carefully placed Davy on the air mattress in the master bedroom. I knew he wanted to be with his mother, but she needed rest as well. There were many questions I wanted answered, but that would be for another time. The week went by slowly and quickly. I spent a lot of time with the kids. Laura, in particular, was very inquisitive. She asked me why I came back, how long I planned to stay, whether I lived with anyone else, if I wanted to be a mother again, and the hardest question, why I stopped being a mother. She was a serious interviewer, and I tried to be honest with her. I explained that I made very poor decisions that affected the whole family, and I sincerely apologized. I told her that I had spent the past year trying to understand why I made the decisions I did and realized that more than anything, I wanted to be with my family. She was silent and didn't offer forgiveness right away. I would have to earn it. Diana was much less critical but really wanted to make sure I didn't leave again. Davy was just himself. He asked, "Mom, do you love us?" I cried like a child in front of him, and he hugged me and cried with me. At night, he often came to hug me. Diana did too. One night, I had my 2 children in bed with me, but not Laura. I felt so spoiled for leaving my family and being dishonest with my husband. I thought I loved him, so why did I do what I did? Britt had been here for a month, and it was January, time for the kids to go back to school and for me to return to work full-time. I had been working from home as much as I could over the past month on my laptop and mobile phone. A decision needed to be made by Britt, the kids, and me. I took the kids to the warehouse office where we used to run our business. They settled into our conference room and did their homework while I brought cans of orange drink and closed the door. "Okay, we need a family meeting," I announced. Everyone quickly looked up from their books and iPads. Laura said the obvious, "Mom isn't here." "Should we wait until we get home?" "No, I want to talk about your mother. I want the 4 of us to discuss the past month she's been here and get your opinions. Davy, let's start with you. I know what you'll say, but go ahead." Davy took a sip of his orange drink and said, "Damn it, Dad, I want Mommy to stay with us. I don't want her to leave. Besides, I really hate this air mattress." His directness made everyone laugh. "Okay, 1 vote for your mother to stay," I said, looking at Diana. "Honey, did you like having Mommy here?" Diana looked at us all and said, "Yes, I really missed her and was glad when she came. I want her to stay." That was 2 votes for their mother. I turned to Laura. "What's your decision?" Laura, always mature and perceptive, said, "What do you want, Dad? It's not just about you, it's about your feelings for your mother. But that goes for you too. If we want her to live with us, does that mean you'll leave suddenly?" Diana and Davy's faces became serious as they looked at me. I knew they weren't thinking about it from that perspective, but Laura was. I told them, "If your mother stays, we'll have many difficult problems to solve. She has made a good start by coming here. Dad, do you still love her? Laura asked. I looked at my 3 children. I never stopped loving your mother. She did things that meant I couldn't stay married to her, but I always loved her. Prosecutor Laura continued, can you live with her again? Before answering, I took a deep breath and exhaled. I knew that for the sake of my family, I had to try to repair my relationship with Britt. I saw how much Laura wanted her mother back and how her attitude had softened over the past month. So, I told them what I wanted to do. They smiled and came up for a group hug, and we all cried together. Later that night, when we got home, we sensed something delicious was cooking. As we walked in and unloaded our backpacks onto the dining room table to finish our homework, Mom peeked around the corner. Dinner will be ready in a while, so clear the table in 20 minutes and wash your hands. Dad hadn't hugged or kissed Mom even once in the last month. He was very polite, but there was no physical affection. The 3 of us muttered okay and continued with our tasks. I watched my dad closely. The next few minutes would indicate our future. Before sitting down at the table, Dad went to the refrigerator, took out 2 bottles of beer, opened them, and placed them where he and Mom would sit. Dad never drinks beer with dinner unless it's a special occasion. We all put food on our plates and started eating. We looked at Dad and Mom, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. When would they realize this? At some point, Dad looked at me, and I looked back with wide eyes. He said, come on, keep going. The whole dinner was just chat about school and business expansion. We laughed a bit, though Davy was trying to avoid school due to a new and difficult math teacher. While cleaning up after dinner, I kicked my father in the shin and scowled at him. What are you going to tell her? If not, then I will. He frowned in response. Wait, Missy. I'll do it in my own time and when I'm ready. 15 minutes later, can I take you all to the dining room for a moment? Everyone looked at me as we were spread out between the dining area and the living room, and Diana was in the bedroom she shared with her sister. Laura shouted, Diane, get out of here now. Okay, guys, I have a little announcement, I began. Davy told me that he would really like to have his bed back, although he enjoys sleeping on the air mattress. He admitted to me today that since school has started, he needs a good night's sleep to learn to read, write, and solve simple math problems. All 4 of them looked at me and each other, trying to understand what was happening. I took a few steps towards Britt and stood next to her. Could you come and share the master bedroom with me for the sake of our son's education? I asked. Britt covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks, and she stood up. I slowly walked up to her, and for the first time in more than a year, I hugged her. I never stopped loving you. I want you to be my wife again, and I know the children want you to be their mother again. They even voted today. It was unanimous. 2 years later, Britt said, I really like Australia now. I'm used to driving on the left side of the road. Just one slight turn of the fenders taught me to stay left on a roundabout. We moved to a bigger house a little further out of town. There's space for a garden and some relaxation. This is good because the child is growing quickly. Nathan is about a year old now and he crawls all over the place. Laura and Diana argue over who gets to push the stroller when we go outside. I thank my lucky stars that I was brave enough to board that plane just over 2 years ago. The airline delivered our large suitcases a week after I arrived in Melbourne. I hid them in the garage at another house until I moved into the master bedroom with Cam. They were unpacked immediately after that. I went to work part-time at a construction company in interior design, helping clients choose finishes for their homes. I got pregnant with Nathan right after Cam and I started sharing a bedroom again. It wasn't long before the first couple of nights were a little awkward, but we got through it. Feeling him next to me was the best experience of my life. I was at home with my husband and children. This is where I belonged. We got married right after I found out I was pregnant with Nathan. My parents came from the States to visit us and were there when Nathan was born. Laura is almost 15, Diana is 13, and Davy is 10. I thank those very lucky stars that I was able to figure out what was important to me and to my family. I overcame the tragedy I created, and my family went through this. It will never happen again. Why did I cheat on my husband and children? Well, it's complicated and simple at the same time. I did it because I thought it would make me feel good about myself as a woman. I did it because I thought I could separate that part of myself from real life. I did it because I thought I deserved it. I did it because I wanted control. I thought it was exciting in my secret life. I did it because it was dangerous. I did it because I was foolish. I let my foolishness control me and gave in to the idea that I wanted thrills outside of marriage because I could have them. Where did this lead me? To loneliness. Thank God I received help and became wiser. Thank God I realized what was truly important in my life. Thank God I boarded that plane, risked being rejected, and came back to my family. Thank God they still allowed me back into their lives. I don't want to think about what I would have done if they hadn't. I was able to turn things around and make my life something I can be proud of. I want my husband and children to be proud of me. What do you think of our story today? I thought the husband did the right thing and didn't charge his wife with anything from the beginning, but gathered evidence first. What's your impression? Write in the comments. Until new videos.